Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video I thought we would talk about dynamic crosshairs and how to make different sort of HUD elements using the HUD class that you might have seen here over in the world settings. And I know it's kind of a bit of an obsolete thing these days, not a lot of people use it, although it is pretty handy for storing some variables in multiplayer because it exists, like it does here in the list, in between the player controller and the pawn class in that multiplayer stack. So it's a handy place for storing some variables, and we're going to talk about how to use it today. So let's, just for starters, make ourselves a new blueprint. Right-click and make a new blueprint, and type in HUD here and just make a base HUD class. And we can call this one, let's call it FP underscore HUD. And we'll open them up, and as we see here, we get your familiar sort of blueprint window. We're not going to add anything into components, and we're not going to add anything into the viewport. We're going to head over here to the event graph and just delete the default events. And the event that we want, if we right click, is draw HUD. Event receive draw HUD, which is going to be executed basically when the game starts. When the player is loaded in, it's going to load whichever HUD is listed here in the game mode and carry on from there. And in fact, while we're at it, let's add our FP HUD here to the default HUD class. Next, let's open up our first person character, which is over here for some reason. And mine might look a little strange. I've still got the code hooked up from the Fireballs video. I really should reset it to default, but it doesn't matter. We can press on. Doesn't matter what your pawn looks like. This will work in anything regardless. So the first thing we'll do is get our HUD object. So if we right click, grab ourselves a begin play event, draw off here. No, actually we want to right click, get our player controller. Oh, if I can spell our player controller, drag off from our player controller, we want to get HUD, so we get the HUD object of our controller, and then drag out of our get HUD into a cast, and cast to our FP underscore HUD. And we can right click this and convert it to a pure cast because we are sure that it's always going to succeed because we've set our FP HUD over here in our game mode. So with our cast there, we're going to drag off this and click promote to variable. So we get our HUD object over here as a variable in our first person character. So we'll just call this HUD and then hook this up to begin play. And now we can always call on our HUD. So if we want to get variables and that kind of things out of the HUD, it's always just right there for us to access because we have this reference. Speaking of, let's head over to our HUD and we're going to make ourselves a new variable, call it player speed, and convert this to a string. So I'll compile that and save it. And then back in our character, if we right click here, we'll get ourselves the event tick. There we go. We can probably make this into a function, but the tick is just a simplest, and for the sake of this video, it's not going to make much difference. If we grab our character movement on the side, get the velocity of our character movements, which is a vector over here. You might know where I'm going with this, given the new variable we just made. Come out of our velocity, get the vector length, of our vector, which will convert it to a float, just give us our one-digit speed value for our player. If we come out of our, in fact, I'm going to make a little more space up here. If we come out of our vector length into a round, this will round to the nearest whole number for our vector length. So we just get no decimals at the end or anything. And then out of our, let's grab our HUD actually, and then get our HUD and set our player speed. Just like that. Connect our the result of our round here into player speed, and then hook up this player speed node to our event tick node. Okay, cool. So now we are getting the speed of the player converted to a string and sent to the HUD, and setting our HUD here in begin play. It's pretty simple. I hope this makes sense because we are about to get freaky. So let's head over to our HUD and make some magic happen. So this event receive draw HUD has two outputs, the size X and the size Y. This is the dimensions of your screen. So we can use this size X and Y to determine, well, anything to do with the width and height of your actual play area. So we can find the center by doing some calculations, which we'll do in a sec. But for now, I would like to shill one of my new Gumroad products. If we come cruise over here, I've gone and made a crosshair pack with over 80 different unique crosshairs for you guys. I even included a font here, which is it's fairly cool. It's a distance-filled font. No default characters, but it does have some very excellent, sort of similar to the classic like Counter-Strike digital, like clock sort of style numbers. We'll see this a little bit later. Just thought I'd let you guys know this is available on Gumroad, and I'm going to be using a few of these files going forward. You can make your own crosshairs, of course. They're all fairly straightforward. If I open up something like If we go like the hollow sight frame, you can see they're all in white so that we can tint them 192 by 192 and perfectly centered. And if you get the pack, you'll also get this very handy 4K size screen template that I used to make a lot of these crosshairs, and this will give you good sort of framework for building up your first-person shooters and that kind of thing. It was very handy to me, so I thought I'd include it in the pack. Alright, with that out of the way, I'm going to be using some of these files here, so if you'd like to follow along with exactly the same thing that I'm doing, be sure to pick up this pack on Gumroad. Really helps to support the channel, to support me and what I do, but obviously not necessary. You can go ahead and make your own files if you like. So let's jump back into our HUD here, and let's see what we can do here. So the HUD class here has a few interesting nodes that no other object does. If we type in draw, you can see here that we have a few, well, these are draw debugs, but we've got draw box, lines, text, materials, rectangles, textures, texture simple. It's just a whole lot of nodes here for just drawing things on screen in the HUD class. And these can all be made movable, animated, that kind of thing, because there's still an event tick, and you can still make functions and stuff. It acts like a regular class, just with some extra flashy things. So let's make some calculations here based on our size x and y. For starters, we want to divide our width and our height by 2. This will get us the halfway point between our width and our height. Then we want to adjust the middle point, because if you notice, I don't know if a lot of you guys are aware, but in most first-person shooters, where the crosshair is in the screen is not the direct center. It's often slightly lower down than the actual middle of the screen. So if we come out of this integer here into a subtract, and subtract, say, 8 pixels, we can duplicate this, connect it to our y size, and then we want to convert these to a decimal value. So we'll just get a 2 to float, just like that. And this will just convert our integer into a float so that we can use it to plug in, some float values. And with that done, we are basically ready to start making calculations. Although your crosshairs are going to have different size to mine probably, or every crosshair is going to be different. So you want to also have an offset, because if you just use the crosshair as is in our, I'll get the node up so you guys can see, in a draw texture node like this, see, we have the X and the Y location to draw the texture, but it's going to draw the texture. Say if this was the texture here, it'll draw it from the top left corner, which you don't want. You want it to be drawn from the middle of the texture so that the crosshair appears, centered. So the way that we do that is that we just add a little offset here. So let's come out of our dots here. We'll get an addition. We just want to add, I think it's, we'll use an addition. We'll add, we'll use a subtraction, and we'll subtract 96 pixels, which is the halfway point between 0 and 192. And 192 by 192 is the dimension of the crosshairs that I'll be using. So that's why I'm using 96, if that makes sense. And then we can plug these into screen X and screen Y. So this will center our crosshair exactly as we need it to be. And I'll even plug this in over here. The next thing we want to do is we can hit this down value here. We have our texture U width and height. I think we can set these to 1, I think. Yep. Texture U and V, they can remain at 0. The screen width and height, this is the dimensions of our crosshair, so we'll set these to 192 and 192. Then we have our blend mode, translucence. These are a little bit like Photoshop blend layers, and it will control sort of how the crosshair is going to blend over the top of the scene. And then we have our tint color, which if we, in fact, we'll come out of here into a make linear color, so we get our RGB and A values. I'm just going to set these all to 1, or actually I'll leave them at 0 so we get a nice classy black crosshair. And then as for our alpha, we'll promote this to a variable. I'm going to call it xhair alpha, and set this something also classy. I'll compile it first. Set this to say 0.6. Remember, this has to be a value between 0 and 1 because we're dealing with colors now. Lastly, we set a texture. Let's see if we'll find a nice classy one. Broken circle, 1 pixel. Should be quite nice. So we'll compile that and save it. Back in our editor, so we have our first person character here, which should be the one where we set our HUD. Don't know why I closed it, but there it all is. And there's the HUD that it references, so when we hit play, there you see we have our 1 pixel broken circle crosshair in a classy little semi-transparent way. I really like the look of these 1-pixel crosshairs. It's very, very clean, very old school Ghost Recon, if any of you guys ever played that. Anyway, from here we can continue forward. Let's come straight out of our draw texture here into draw text. Now, draw text has a couple of different little things. For example, there's the actual text window here. Let's just drag in our player speed, plug this into our text. We have our text color. If we right-click this and split, we can control these right here in the in the node, but we can recombine that and just copy our linear color node here with our crosshair alpha and plug this into our text color. There we go. The screen X and Y are going to be slightly different because, I mean, if we plug in just our regular screen X and Y, it'll be directly in the center. So if we come out of these two, I might duplicate these. Where we go? Yeah, these subtraction nodes. Oh wait, no, not out of there. We don't want to come out of there. We want to come out of our dots here. So we'll come out of our dots into another pair of subtractions, and we'll change, say, this bottom one. Actually, we'll go like minus 48. Plug this into Y, and this one into X. And our font, this will be our digital digits, which you can find in the download pack with the crosshair, but you can just use any font that you want. And while I'm on it, actually, I'll come over here, find where I put my font, and open this up. So I might cover fonts in a bit more depth in a future video, but they're kind of tricky. They're a whole discipline of their own. But if you do download the crosshair pack and you do get my digital digits font here, these are the settings that I've gone and used. So the distance field scale factor is 32. Oh, and what you want to do, by the way, before I get ahead of myself, is to find use distance field alpha, check this, and then go asset, and then re-import asset. And you might even want to duplicate it before you do this and give it a different name so that it doesn't overwrite the original font that you've got, just in case you want to use it for widgets and that kind of thing. And other than that, yeah, I've gone and adjusted some of these values here just so that it fits a bit better, so that it looks nice and all of that. So if you can, just screenshot this page and yeah, handle those values yourself. I won't go into too much detail, maybe some other time. So we'll just add all that in, and I think we're ready to rumble. So let's compile this and save it. We can hit play, and here we go. So now we have a readout of the speed that the player is going, up to 600 units, which is the maximum speed determined by character movement over in the player pawn. All right, with that all done, I think we can start getting into the juicy stuff. So what we're going to do is use the knowledge that we've learned here and make ourselves a nice, awesome-looking, dynamic crosshair. So to do this, let's grab our draw texture here, and we can disconnect some stuff and change a few things around here so that it works a bit better. What we'll need is the 4-point crosshair, very small single. And if we find this file and we have a look at it, as you can see, it's just a little line, just comes just straight down from the center, a little bit of a gap there. And we're going to be using this 4 times, so we can sort of rotate around and get that traditional sort of old school plus looking crosshair. So we've got our 4-point crosshair small. I think everything else needs to basically stay the same. We can delete these 2 subtraction nodes here. We're not going to need those. And to make our crosshair actually behave in a dynamic way, we'll have to grab our player speed here and do some calculations. For one, we can convert this to a float because we know that it's just a number. And then out of here, let's get a divide. Float divided by a float, divide by 35. I might just breeze through this. So you can adjust these calculations yourself. We want to multiply by -1. And we want to add 96. So yeah, these values, these calculations will vary depending on what you're doing. Just want to breeze through this pretty quickly because I'm running a bit over time. So we'll use this to get our player speed and then adjust the location on screen of our crosshair elements depending on how fast the player is actually moving. I hope that makes sense. The next thing we'll do is adjust just our location here. So we want to have 4 different draw texture nodes here, and I want to keep our text out of the way because we'll keep that for later. And we'll have one for the bottom, left, right, and the top. So let's just hook all of these boys up. There we go, and make just a slightly different calculation for each one so that we know where each one is going to be. And that's going to look like this. So we want to subtract actually, we want our subtraction just like before. 96 here. This will control the X location, so the sideways location of our first one, which will be the default, which will just be the bottom. And we want to get the result here of our little calculation and subtract it from the Y value. So we'll plug this up here into Y. And then we'll be doing something pretty similar for the other three. So we'll come out of our top dot here into a float plus float, and we'll add this to our calculation down there at the bottom. Plug this into screen X, because this will be the one for the left-hand side. So it's going to be moving left, right, not up, down. And similar to before, we'll come out of our little dot here, get ourselves another plus. Oh, actually, I've made a mistake. No, we need a minus up here. So holding Control and grab, and you can grab the arms out of your nodes like that. And I'll just swap that for a subtract. My mistake. Pretend you didn't see that. And then 96 in this add, and this will go into Y. Actually, have I? Oh, I've done this backwards. So let's plus on top for screen X, and we want to minus 96 from our bottom dot for screen Y. Sorry about that little confusion. Let's just swiftly move forward. So I'm just going to duplicate both of these nodes here, minus on top, just so we can keep track. So the top dot goes into the minus, and the bottom dot here goes into our calculation. And we'll be adding 96 here. This will be the right hand crosshair arm. We'll plug this into screen X and Y. And then finally for the top, we'll get a plus, so it's a minus, yeah, so we'll get a plus and another plus. And we'll have a plus 96 in our screen X. This will up it a little bit. So this will plug into our top dot over here. And our bottom dot goes into this plus, and we'll add the result of our calculation. Wow, it does look a little bit messy, but we're just reusing the same sort of things over and over. In fact, we can probably bump this up here so you can see it a little clearer. And we'll move this sort of down here so you can see where that plugs into. It does look a little messy. It does, but it's the same calculation just being done 4 different times in 4 of the same node. So let's, for one last thing, we can do a little bit of swag here. We can get a little bit of swag by having the crosshair fade out when the player is moving furthest. In other words, when it's at its most expanded. So we can delete this crosshair alpha variable there. We can come out of our little calculation here. Let's find ourselves a map range clamped. And this map range clamped is going to take whatever result we get from our player speed, which would be a value from, well, the actual float here is a value from 0 to 600, but we apply some calculations, and it's going to take the result of this, which would be something like, well, I know that the in-range A is going to be 96, I think in-range B is 78, but again, this will be slightly different depending on what you're using in your setup. And we want our outrange, which is what we're going to map this range into. We want it to be anywhere from 1 to, say, 0.05. 0 will be totally transparent. And then we can plug in our map range here into the alpha of our linear color. And then our linear color just goes into the tints of each of our crosshairs here. And we can leave our text as is. In fact, we can hook it back up to our tree because we like that. And I like using that font because I made it myself and I'm pretty proud of myself. All right, so let's compile that. We'll hit save and then we'll hit play. And okay, I've clearly forgotten something. I think it's... Oh, right. Yeah, we have to rotate our crosshairs. Otherwise, they're all going to be appearing... They're all going to be appearing like this, which we don't want. We want to be rotating them around as we go. So 0 here, because that's the one on the bottom. Minus 90 for the left. 90 for the right. And then 180 for the top. All right, so that should be all that we need to do. So we'll compile that, hit play again. Oh, still not... oh, now I know what's happened. So with left and right here, I got the negatives wrong. So the first one, which is the left-hand one, should be 90, and the right-hand one should be minus 90 in the rotation. So we'll compile, hit play, and there we have it. All right, finally, we finally got it. So we have a nice, classy, semi-transparent, dynamic crosshair made with simple assets and an old-school HUD class. So, I hope you guys learned something out of this. I know that the HUD class is a bit obsolete, a bit deprecated, but I still get some use out of it. I still like playing around with crazy cool crosshairs, and made an awesome crosshair pack for you guys. So definitely check that out. I mean, you get this free digit font as well. And I will catch you guys in the next one. So cheers.